With July just around the corner, we've got a whole new set of great looking cards and a boost to move. There's also quite a few other cards in here that could give boosts to other archetypes that haven't been seen play for a while. So, jumping straight into it, we have Spider-Man Brand New Day, which is a 1/2, movable twice. After this moves to a location, give one of your other cards there +1 power. This is a bit of an interesting one. It's sort of like a light version of Jeff, for example. Movable twice, this is the first time we've seen this sort of keyword. Might take a little bit to keep track of how much you're moving it, unless it has like a kind of indicator on the card, which it might do. I record these just before the videos go out, so in case there's any updates or get to see how these cards play in action, we'll find out a few days later. But for now, I'm going to assume there's probably some way to tell. If that is the case, obviously it's not too tricky to keep track of, but for the card itself, it's a 1/2 that moves twice. Technically becomes a 1/4, right? But at the same time, if you move it via, I don't know, like a Madam Web or a Ghost Spider or something like that, right? It's also proccing based off being moved by that, which is quite nice. Because it's giving +1s, this feels like it could be going into that sort of Venus style list, and I did make a video when Venus dropped. I think it was for Jeff, a move deck that relied on getting a bunch of buffs with things like Craven and Batroc, and this card will 100% work within a deck like that, and some of the upcoming ones probably would too. But this is a pretty solid card. I don't think it's going to be busted by any means, because if you think about Batroc, that card itself is probably the strongest piece move has. But it's also a 1/2, but it bounces around a whole bunch and gives itself power after power. Now, you could focus on the fact that Spider-Man's going to be buffing other cards, which, yes, but do you really want to try and fit that into an archetype that's also move? I can think of probably like Human Torch or Multiple Man. Cards like that would like a card like this if you're trying to go for the buff and move archetype, but if it's purely for the buffs, Batroc is better. I think this card is good, but I'm going to keep it at a 3.5. Now, 3.5 is kind of reserved, but at the same time, I think Jeff is better. But Jeff hasn't seen as much play or gone up to that higher echelon cards. So next up we have the Super Premium Season Pass card with Mary Jane, which is a 3/3. End of turn, give each of your cards that moved this turn +1 power. So she's an end of turn card, which is quite nice because we haven't really had many of those recently, and also an end of turn card that probably won't work too well with Invisible Woman, which again is quite nice. Now, it's a bit of an interesting deck building decision with this card, because you don't really want it just for flat out power, because you have to play it turn 3, right? And then you're needing to assess after that how many cards are actually moving each turn to make this worth it. Now, obviously it works with Spider-Man, then probably works with Venus as well, because every turn you're going to be getting that +1 power. Honestly, there may very well be a deck that comes out where Invisible Woman gets used with this, but because it's only +1 power, it doesn't feel too useful. And if you're running Mary Jane, Invisible Woman, and Venus, it's probably too much at that point. So the question is, where do you want to run her? And I find that kind of a tricky question, because if you look at Venus, that card is basically giving +1 to everything that would get +1. That card can go up to like a 3, or like a 15 some games. But Mary Jane, I don't foresee her ever reaching that limit, and she's also kind of restricted in the decks that she's going to go into. Now, someone may very well come out with like a Human Torch list, and I do see these two cards working more with the classic move. Say like you move Human Torch and it doubles its power, and then Mary Jane gives it a power because it, that sort of thing, right? But in those lists, they tend to lean more towards Tribunal, just because you get a huge Human Torch and then you just increase the power. But because Human Torch is probably going to prefer having like a Ghost Spider and an Iron Fist and a bounce card to basically scale its power more, I don't know if +1 power is that useful for it. Now, there could be an area that I'm not seeing, like Silk, for example. I don't know. If you have Silk and you have Batroc, and then you play Mary Jane, both of them move, and then they get +1 power from her. Silk's probably going to be moving every turn, so she's always getting +1 power. That is probably the area she's going to be more useful in. I'm going to give her 3 stars. Now, 3 stars does sit just above a mid level, mainly because I do think she's going to have some form of deck that she sees playing. She works perfectly with Jeff. There's probably going to be some kind of move, buff, or empower, I guess, style deck, purely based off the fact that Jeff, Spider-Man, and Mary Jane all exist, and Venus. Something that I'm not really thinking of right now, too heavily anyway. There's probably something out there that I'm missing, for example. But either way, it's a pretty decent card, one worth picking up if you like move, because it's more than likely going to go into some form of list in the future. Then we have the weekly release card, which is Aunt May. She is a 2/3 with end of turn. If you used a movable ability, give a movable card in your hand -1 cost and +2 power. So with this card, there are 2 factors to bear in mind. A movable ability, so what does that consist of? Does that consist of any card that can move another card, right? Does that consist of Madam Web moving a card? Is that a movable ability? Probably, right? Ghost Spider pulling a card, a movable ability? I would say so. So does a card itself that is movable when it moves probably also considered a movable ability? That part I am more confident on. But the second part is give a movable card in your hand -1 cost and +2 power. Now, going back to Human Torch not first steps, just Human Torch. It's like ingrained into me at this point to say first steps, but the regular Human Torch, it doesn't have movable on its text. It's a card that you want to move, but I highly doubt Aunt May is actually going to buff it, because by that logic, technically any card that you could move with Madam Web is a movable card, right? So I think the card itself has to have movable, meaning I think this card is limited. I can't think of too many. I mean, there's Jeff and the other Jeff. There's Spider-Man. Silk then technically isn't a movable card either, because her text is something like, if you played a card here at the end of the turn, move, but she doesn't have movable. So something like Vision, for example, or Nocturne, or Nightcrawler, those sort of things. But I don't know if you play enough of those in a deck to make a card like Aunt May worth it, right? You have to play her turn 2, then say you play Nightcrawler and Jeff, right? But then you only get 1 proc of Aunt May because she's end of turn. If you used a ability this turn, give, etc. As opposed to for each movable ability used this turn. So she's even limited in that fact. If you played her and then played Nocturne, and then she discounted your Nightcrawler, so the next turn you play Nightcrawler with something else, that could be pretty strong. But I don't know if there's that many decks that want to use straight up movable cards. If you're using movable, you probably have Craven, and if you have Craven, then you're including things like Silk, or you're including things like Ghost Spider, you know? The problem with Aunt May is she kind of conflicts with those cards that want to be moved but don't have movable in their tag, and the fact that you have to play a movable to proc on a movable is another problem. The fact that also if you play her on turn 6 she's useless, if you play her on turn 5 you have to play a movable card the same turn. She's very restrictive, I think. I'm a little bit hesitant to rate her too low because -1 cost and +2 power, as we have seen, has been pretty strong. But because it's limited to only giving it to a movable card, I think it is much weaker. I'm going to give it 2.5 stars. I'll give 2.5 because there is a possibility, right? Somebody gets a deck where you've got Nightcrawler and you've got Jeff and all these movable cards that will work with cards like Craven, right? Then you probably don't go down the route of having Silk and these other things. You focus more on just having cards with movable in their name. Spider-Man obviously being one of those. But then it's a little bit awkward, I don't know, because technically Batroc isn't movable, right? He is, when one of your cards moves, move to its location and gain +2 power. Well, when a card moves, right? I think it works for the opponent as well. But regardless, it doesn't have movable in its text. And because of that, I think there's just so many cards you want to run in the movable deck that it doesn't give her ability enough uses. Probably fits somewhere along the lines of like a Ravonna Renslayer, right? Whereas Ravonna is permanent reduction in cost, whereas this one you have to kind of keep playing turn after turn. It's one I'm unsure of, but I think 2.5 is kind of fence-sitting enough. I was going to give her 2, but 2.5 just to cover my back, just in case. Next up on July 7th is Tarantula, which is a 2/2, end of turn again. If you have the highest power among cards in play, give this 2 cards in your hand plus 1 power. Now, this is an interesting one. Definitely leads into that Kingpin Techno-Organic Virus style archetype. I definitely think you run Kingpin with this card. It's a no-brainer, really. Which means then you probably run something like Martyr, right? Sort of limits the card and what decks it could be in. It's 10 times better than War Machine, I think. The Punisher War Machine. That card was a little too restrictive. This card is cool though. At the end of the turn, if you do have the highest power, and probably if you're drawing highest power with the opponent, the same way that Kingpin works, I would imagine this also goes off. So cards like Debris or whatnot would work perfectly with this. And the thing is, it's buffing itself as well. A 2-2 to 2-3, 2-4 is probably not going to be winning the highest power card out there, but it's also giving cards in your hand plus power, which allow you to kind of keep that effect snowballing. Then you would more than likely run it with Viv, right? Then you're starting to get a bit of an idea of a deck together where you can be buffing things in your hand that are wanting that power as well. And because Viv exists, I do think Tarantula could very easily fit into that style deck where you're wanting to win locations or have the highest power card on board. It has a possibility to be a menace, but because it does sort of step on Viv's toes a little bit, I do also think that it could support her, right? Now, Viv is a very strong card. I think a very underrated card, even though she is showing up in very strong decks. I think she's been pushed to the side a bit recently. I'm going to give Tarantula 4 stars. Now, this card by default is a 2-2, right? And I think at least like 3 turns of the game, if you play us on turn 2, at least 3 turns, you're probably going to have the highest power card in play, right? And if the opponent is always stepping on your toes, like they get their Wilson Fisk out and they basically just have nothing else, you're going to be in trouble because the card's not proccing. But I would imagine that's probably in a similar way that Viv just doesn't proc, right? But with Viv, you have backups of like Silver Surfering it or using its move, which I don't really think people tend to do, but you get my point. 4 stars is a high rating, but I didn't go for 4.5 or 5 because I do think if it's in a deck, against a deck, sorry, that your opponent is playing a big card, you're kind of just outright screwed, which doesn't have much redeeming quality there, unfortunately, but I do still think it's pretty strong. So next up we have a Series 4 card on July 9th, which you will get from a limited time game mode, which is Tombstone. It's a 2-3 that reads, on reveal, destroy your lowest power card at each other location. Now, I think this card is just kind of a beast, right? Destroy is always looking for those destroy procs, and Tombstone works perfectly there. It is a card that, in case you're stuck at other locations not being able to destroy them, it's perfect. It really counters Cosmo as well. I do think this card is going to be amazing in decks like Nimrod, for example, where Nimrod just needs a couple of destroy things down. If they've shoried it or Kid Omega'd and then Nimrodded, for example, procs it to the 2 locations, you play Tombstone down on the location where it was before, destroys Nimrod, procs again, destroys, procs. I think honestly it's just perfect for a deck like that. But even in regular destroy, probably not as useful as in regular destroy because you will have a couple of things scattered around. But if you have a Deadpool down on the head pool and you're worried about the location being blocked by Cosmo or something, Tombstone is great for that. Where I do think this card is going to shine is Dormammu. Now those Dormammu decks tend to just want to scatter a bunch of different cards they want destroyed out to other locations, and having a card like Tombstone, honestly, I think is going to work perfectly in those decks. The only downside it has is that it doesn't really scale like Venom and Carnage do. Based on destroying cards, it doesn't get the power from them. But because of its utility of being able to destroy at other locations, I still think it's a very strong card. And for that reason, I'm going to give it a 4.5. I was hesitant on giving it a 5-star, mainly because I only give 1 card a month 5-star, generally apart from last month. But it's also because it's hard to really say, because I don't think a regular destroy deck is going to want to run a card like this. It will more than likely go into something like a Nimrod style list. And because we can't see it in action yet, or really, I'm not too big of a destroy player, so there hasn't been enough destroy playtime under my belt to tell you whether there is many opportunities where you need to destroy the 2 lowest power cards at other locations. But the pure fact that it does play around something like Cosmo already boosts it up in my books, and I think I'm pretty happy with that rating. Next up on the 14th of July, we have Boomerang, which is a 2-2 When this returns to your hand, randomly steal 4 power from cards in your opponent's hand. Activate, return this to your hand. Honestly perfect. I love bounce decks, and I haven't played them in so long because they haven't really been viable, but they also haven't been given a card for the longest time, and Boomerang is a perfect card for that. The fact that it also has an activate to return it to your hand is insane. I also think it's the only card that does something when it returns to your hand other than Kitty Pryde, right? I could be wrong about that, but most bounce cards are bouncing the cards back because they have on reveals they want to trigger again and again. But it goes back to your hand and then steals from the opponent's hand, right? So if you think about it, Scorpion is a 2/3 that just affects your opponent's hand with -1, right? But the thing with Boomerang is, not only is it affecting your opponent's 4 cards, which my other point was going to be, how often does your opponent have more than 4 cards? I don't think it's super often. It might be less often than you think, and in some start decks, they're probably going to be having 4 cards roughly around that amount of time. And because Scorpion already does that, I think this card is crazy. It's not only taking 4 power from them, so they have less power in their hand, it's giving Boomerang that power. So after the activate first proc, it's already a 2/6 that's afflicted 4, so technically a 2/10. If you play it again and bring it back again, it's a 2/10 that has afflicted -8 power into your opponent's hand. Not to mention, you can technically do it again because you've got Toxin, you've got the activate, and you've got Beast as well. So you play this turn 2, you Beast it. Turn 3, you play it, you Toxin it. Turn 4, you play it. Then say, turn 5, you activate it, right? Then turn 6, you play it again. That is nuts. It's gone off 3 times, which makes it a 2/14 that has afflicted -12 power. 5-star. If I didn't say it already, this is by far my 5-star card. It is bringing an archetype back in a big way. It's possible this card gets nerfed before it releases in the upcoming balance patch. It's technically not a balance patch, right? It's just the video they do before the season releases. It wouldn't surprise me if this becomes like a 2/2 randomly steal 3 power from cards in your opponent's hand. Which I've just realized, technically it doesn't afflict -1 power to each card, does it? It just takes 4 power from cards. So it could take 4 from one, or like 2 from one and 1 from another and 1 from another, right? I imagine that's probably how it works. In which case, maybe it makes it better, but like in an Iceman style way, where it could just completely make a card in your opponent's hand redundant. Like if it hits their Captain Carter, for example, for -4 power, they're probably not playing that. But for that reason, it's still a 5-star. Either way, very, very cool card. Then next week on July the 21st, we are following up that Afflict thing with Scorpion Brand New Day, which is a 6/8 ongoing double the power reductions on all enemy cards. So that is the big finisher for Afflict style lists that people have been looking for a while. If you think about, say, like Diamondback, for example, people really want to run Diamondback in their Afflict lists, which works perfectly because on one lane she's turning all Afflicts into like an additional -2 on each afflicted card. Scorpion is even bigger than that. He's basically taking any of those Afflicts and doubling it. So if you've Hazmat an entire lane, that's -1, then you've Diamondbacked it, which is then making it -3 on each card. Scorpion being played down would make it -6 on each of those cards. Just based off of that, I think this card is already kind of nuts. It's going to be a 4.5 again. But I do think it's more versatile than that. If you think about, I don't know, like a Phantom X list or Dormammu again, those decks are playing things like Marrow, and the Dormammu deck is absorbing power. You've got Phantom X that's afflicting -2 across enemy cards. There's a lot more things out there nowadays that afflict power minuses to enemy cards than you might think. Now, I will say day one, obviously Luke Cage is going to be everywhere, so be on the lookout for that. But the fact that this card fits into those style decks as well is very, very cool. Almost tempted to have made it my 5-star, but I'm definitely sticking with Boomerang being my 5-star just because I think it's cooler. I did used to love playing Afflict lists before I became cursed with them for some reason. Every time I played an Afflict list, I would have some horribly unlucky loss. But I'll keep it at a 4.5. Definitely worth keeping an eye out for this one. Then on the very next day, we have a skill, which is a 5-cost Spider Sense. On reveal, give your characters here +2 power, costs 1 less for each movable card you've played. So again, we run back into the Aunt May situation here. This card would probably be played in the Aunt May style deck, but at the same time, you need to play a movable card. So you play Nightcrawler, you play Jeff. Do you really fit 5 cards with the text movable in there? Unless there's something I'm missing, and you guys will probably tell me in the comments. There are probably some cards out there with movable on there that you'd want to run regardless. But I don't know how often you get this down to a 0-cost skill. And your deck building is already strained enough with the fact that you need to play Aunt May, probably Spider-Man, a bunch of movable cards, Spider Sense, then you probably want to run Batroc and Craven, right? It's becoming a little bit all over the place. Now, there is probably some style card that I'm missing, but again, they're definitely talking about the movable and empowerment kind of synergy here, which makes me think there is probably something I'm missing. But at the same time, I cannot tell you. I know there's a Phoenix Force multiple man deck out there at the moment, which, again, might not work too great because I think only Phoenix Force is movable, Mortal Man isn't, and things like Ghost Spider aren't. It's a weird one. I don't know if people have really put much thought into the fact that it says for each movable card you've played. But the flip side to that is obviously if they prove me wrong and it's technically all move cards, so even things like Ghost Spider and things like Silk, things like Madam Web actually trigger this to go down in power, is a much better card. But right now, I'm basing it off the fact that the card has to have movable in its text. So, yeah, I'm going to give this a 2.5 as well. I want to be kind of careful with it because it can become a 0-cost 6, for example. Gives +2 power to the other cards here, in which case would be very good. There could be something I'm missing as well, so I think I will stick with 2.5. So, on the final week of July, July 28th, we have Sinister Six. Now, Sinister Six is a 6/12 with possibly the most confusing text in a while. Game start, the first 6 characters you draw are evil. After you play them all, merge them into this and add this to the last one's location. So, it's a 6/12, and I have heard that it doesn't affect itself, so if you draw it, it's not going to mean that you have to play it, right? It is a shame still because you've drawn it, whereas it could be pulled from your deck, but first 6 characters you draw are evil. Weird text, but it basically just means it's sort of like Zombie Galacti, right? Where it infects other characters in your deck. But it's always the first 6 characters, and you have to play them, which means you kind of want your curve to be low-ish. I spoke about this in the leaks video, where I was like, what if you like play all these and then you have something like Arnim Zola in your deck to just duplicate the Sinister Six, or if you have Taskmaster. But the problem with that is, what if Taskmaster and Arnim Zola are 2 of the first cards you draw? This ability would never go off. There is probably some form of deck building out there that would make a card like this better, sort of like how Zombie Galacti decks got found. I just don't really know with this card. It's such a weird one. You do get a free 12 power added to the board, but similarly to Strange Supreme, they're all going to be merged into one location. So all of your power is getting placed in one place. Maybe then you run Tribunal, but again, then if you have Tribunal and it gets infected, you play an infected Tribunal on turn 6. They're all going to get merged into the Sinister Six. Yeah, I don't really know with this one. Like, let me know if I'm missing something, but I don't think I am. I'm going to have to give this one a 2-star. Purely because any form of card you put in the deck to make the power split to other locations is a possible trigger of a card that would need to be merged into this. And I'm also already not the biggest fan of Strange Supreme, purely because if you play cards in other locations to win power, you can just pull them away, and sometimes it's hard to keep track of them. And then you have to make sure you're winning another location. I've won so many games against that card where he's just pulled a demon away from another location, otherwise they would have won the game, sort of thing. So I think for that reason, I'm going to have to stick giving it a 2-star. But do let me know. Again, there could be something I'm missing, but it's an interesting one. And then lastly, another Series 4 card. I don't know if I mentioned Spider Sense was Series 4, but it was. Another Series 4 card, Jonah, Jameson, which is a 1/3 ongoing. Your text emotes are ruder. So 5-star, right? I don't know with this one. I feel like it's just a meme card. More of a meme card than Uncle Ben was. I think that card felt like a meme when it came out, but then actually got put into some kind of decks. Well, I do have one question. What happens if you play Onslaught on top of this? Or if you play Moonstone, you know? How rude are we going to get with this? I don't know with this card. It's basically just a meme card or an Arisham card, right? But even in an Arisham card, do you want this? I don't know. It's funny, don't get me wrong, but in terms of viability, there are 1/3s out there that just don't get played even though they have abilities. So this is probably going to have to be a 1-star card. I want to rate it higher just because of how fun it is, but if I'm being honest and trying to let you guys know which cards are worth skipping, etc., I'd probably have to rate it a 1. But Jonah is taking the brunt of the 1-star this time around, it seems. But yeah, I guess that wraps it up for all the cards this season. There are some pretty strong ones, some kind of underwhelming ones, and some ones that it might take some time to figure them out. And in that case, I look forward to seeing what everybody does, and then when it comes to the end of the year and I go back through all these videos, I can really just be like, wow, I was very off with that card. I'm not looking forward to that video. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Do feel free to subscribe and like the video. If you want to stick around, I will definitely be covering all of these cards when they release, along with a tier list. That tier list should be coming soon. It's about halfway through the year, and that's roughly when I wanted to wait. I was thinking, what if they did some series drops, but who knows when that's happening. Probably when draft mode happens. But when draft mode happens, I can assure you I'm going to be making many videos on that. Especially seeing as it's kind of like a roguelike-y kind of thing. And my channel was founded on roguelites. So I'm 100% doing more and more of that. But yeah, I hope you guys did enjoy this video. Thank you so much. And I will catch you all next time.